Agreed with you for sure.
Well, you're so sweet. Rona and Carol just said they wouldn't miss this for the world, which I really appreciate. And Rona has to leave early and the recording has begun for our nth edition of the Read What You Want book club.
And now I have to cover up.
Be decent. Definitely be decent.
Okay.
Roseanne, you mentioned Mad Honey, and I finished that and I loved it too. You mentioned Mad Honey, eh?
Yeah.
Was it you, Roseanne? Or was it you,
No.
Carol? Who mentioned
No,
Mad
I didn't
Honey?
mention it. I just finished it last night, but wasn't I found
Somebody
it too
t-
long. It
Did
was
you-
enough.
I liked it. It was very relevant. So it was you that said you read it, or was it Roseanne? I don't remember.
No,
who.
I read it, finished it last
Okay.
night, and I found the education I got was amazing.
Yeah.
About trans and this and that. I never knew.
Yeah, so
what all these-
relevant today, so relevant. It
Yeah.
did go on and on a little bit. I think you're right. Usually I can't put a book like that down,
Yeah.
but I was able to put it down and come back to it, so it wasn't as
Right.
engaged,
Right.
but it was very interesting and well written. Two
Hey,
different
are you
people
writing
wrote
this
it.
down so I don't have to write anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am. And also I'm recording it, so it'll be on YouTube too. So you can always go back to it. But
Did you
I'll
read
include.
that, honey?
I haven't,
Written
but
by two
actually,
people?
yeah, this is Carol Rabinovich actually sent me an email as well. She said that she was going to try to make it today, but just in case she couldn't.
That's who I read. That's
Yeah, it
who
was
I
the wrong
heard.
Carol, but as I said,
So
I mean,
what
that-
that she,
you know
so
how-
she said,
the Carol with the E and the Carol without the E. The Carol without the E wrote it.
What do
wrote a
you
note
think
about it.
about that book being written by a trans and by the writer? That's different, eh?
yeah, so this is funny. So, okay, I'll just read you what Carol wrote to me. She said, a single mother takes over her father's beekeeping business and describes how it's done. Her teenage son is accused of killing his girlfriend. Each author wrote a chapter. Jody wrote the beekeeper. Jennifer wrote the murdered girl. And I also there was a patron that I spoke with not long ago who also was wondering about, like we had a discussion about appropriation, about voice appropriation, because she didn't think that Jodi Picoult should have written it with a trans woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I don't see why that would have been important. And my take on it would be that it is important because there's a lot of the lived reality of people that we are not going to know unless we've lived those experiences. And as much as we can imagine them, it's very different when it's voiced from someone coming from their own experience. Of course, fiction is fiction, and it's not to say that one has to live every experience that one writes about, but especially with something as delicate as sort of the trans experience in particular, I think it's really interesting that Jodi Picoult did that. And I'm glad to hear that you guys liked it. I haven't read it.
You think she did it because it's so relevant today? It's so in the news. Do you think she said, I want to look into this, or?
Oh, I'm sure that's part of it. I mean, we're all influenced by everything around us, right? So when sort of certain narratives keep coming up, then I would imagine that if that's what twigs a storyline in your head, and then you find someone that you could work with to actually make that story come to life in a way that is really alive.
And she made us all learn something about it. It was almost like a learning experience that she wanted her readers to have. And I appreciated that. You know?
When I was selling my jewelry on Sunday of last week, there were 2 or 3 people came to my table, and then they called over somebody, and I you know what? I had to hold myself to get a shock. He must have been 6 foot tall. It was a he. There's no question he was transgender, but he was, with the makeup and the skirt they wearing. But he was no question. He was a man. There was no question. I don't care how many things, but I had to hold myself like he was looking at my jewelry, and I'm like, I had to hold myself from staring. I did want to stare because it was fascinating, and just how he must, like, walking in the hallways. I mean, no question, you had to know he was a man dressed.
Everybody gawks.
Well, born a man, right?
You couldn't miss it. He's a visible minority. There's no question. He's not one of these effeminates. He's obviously a man's man, and now he's like Bruce Jenner, you know, like I mean? So
Exactly. I mean, Bruce Jenner's a man that's dressing like a woman. I mean, I know I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm certainly for everything, but you can't help it. If you're a man, you're a man. You can't turn into a woman overnight. It's
That's right.
impossible.
So no,
I
it's
think
very
that I think we should watch our language a little bit, just in terms of
I'm not saying anything get bad.
but this is no, it's just like that born a man, but living as a woman. So then her pronouns would be she, her.
Oh, you're right.
Oh,
You're
maybe.
right.
Yeah.
Or them, she,
Is
her, and there's a them. Isn't there a them too?
Yeah, some people
Yeah.
identify as they. Yeah.
Hey,
They, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We should use the proper term. It's only respectful.
The thing I found most poignant was the very end, when the woman said, I lost 2 children, not 1. Basically, that was what she was saying.
Right.
You know, you want to cry. She went through this
Yeah.
horror twice. It was just,
Yeah.
but what an understanding woman she was. You know, we know about people who are gay, and I've always said, whatever you are, life is tough, but to be gay is very tough, I'm sure. But this, I mean, it's just, it's mind blowing, you know, it's beyond the gay. Can you imagine how difficult the life is? You could feel it in the writing, but oh my God, what a story, an eye opener.
It's a funny thing because I mean, politically, right? Like we think about, you know, a few decades ago and the ways that parents reacted when their children came out as queer.
Right.
And then how oftentimes it was, and this is why people stayed closeted so long. It's like people would say like they didn't want their kids to live that way. And part of that for some more open parents, it wasn't that they were necessarily against queerness so much as just seeing like, this is going to make my child's life so much more challenging, so
Absolutely.
much more
Very
difficult.
Yeah.
Because
You know, I
mean,
have it in my family. I'm sorry, go ahead, Katie. I don't want to cut you off.
go ahead. I can come back.
I have it in my family. My nephew, my sister's son, has a 3rd child that was born a girl and has transgendered into a male. And you know what? They live in New Jersey, so I don't really see them that often, but nobody really talks about it. That's my sister, who's the grandmother, forget it. She can't understand it, but you know, but nobody really talks about it. It's quiet. I don't know whether, I know he had hormones to get rid of the breasts, and I don't know about the bottom surgery, but it's like kept still very quiet, and it's in my family. So I'm wondering if it, you know, it's not as talked about. People still feel it, you know, like it's hard to talk about it. I have it, like, you know, so I don't know if anybody else has it in their family, but that's my experience.
Not in mine, but my niece's nephew completely. Jacob is called Jay, and his mother is the only one who can mix up and say she, because he's
right. And the rest of the family, what do the rest of the family say? Do they talk about it?
It's her uncle, my little 8-year-old. It's her uncle, and she saw him as a he, but now she's a she, and she says she, no problem, absolutely. So I have to be careful when I'm talking about him and asking about him.
Yeah, we all have to be careful. I find that too.
I have to say she, and I get corrected all the time.
Well,
but you want to know what, Katie, when you say it affects their life. This particular, my nephew's daughter was a brilliant girl. She still is. She finished high school in 3 years. She had to switch universities once or twice because obviously I don't know how accepted she was or he was, and he graduated, now it's a he, but he's never really reached his full potential. I think he's just working in a transgender sort of like an atmosphere, like helping other people, but never really was able to fulfill what, I mean, he could have become a doctor, whatever, but I think the experience at university and even to be at graduate school was probably too difficult. He was not accepted. They're not accepted as much as you think, you know?
Well, it could also be too, because he recognized like the lack of rights accorded to right? So then
Exactly.
that's what he decided
And
to
now
focus
he's
on, is
working,
to,
yeah.
again, contributing more
Yeah.
to like the social justice sort of,
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what happened.
3. I substituted in a grade 3, and already there was a kid in the class that had changed.
mhm.
Well, I have a
Um,
friend
And
years
that's
ago.
amazing.
I'm sorry. You
No,
know,
I'm just saying, the kids all knew him when he was in kindergarten as a him, but then
Right.
he switched and his parents let him. So he's been as girl, and the only time it's ever mentioned is when there's a new kid in the school, somebody will say something, and then of course he cries in the call in the law, and that I didn't
Of
know. I
course.
didn't know what happened. I didn't know why he was crying, and
So
I didn't.
sad, yeah.
I had a
No,
girlfriend
no,
from
that was
years ago.
Nobody tells me about it. I don't know. I got my substitute, but I only realized that, oh, and I had to, I had to try to, but meanwhile,
Course.
he's only 7 years old, 8 years old, and
Oh.
already he's dressing as what he wants.
Right, that's what happens at 3, 4, 5. They realize. I remember my nephew's daughter we were at her bat mitzvah. So she was 12, and she came dressed in a tux, and we couldn't figure out and it was then she was, even before, changing to dress in the body she felt comfortable in.
Carol, what were you going to
Yes,
say about
no,
your
I have
girlfriend?
a friend, and like this is 70 years ago, so you can imagine what the parents went through. And when the child was born, the child's name was Martin. And my mother told me the child's name is not Martin, it's Margot. But it was never discussed. So I don't know how, but this is like more than 70 years ago. So you
Mhm.
can imagine, I mean, now we're talking about it and we're being educated, but can you imagine what the family went through and what this poor child went through?
Mhm.
The name change when the parents said, no, his name is, no, it's Margot, and
Mhm.
what a horror
Well,
story that
it's a
is.
funny thing, right? It's like there is so much in the world that we live in now that we're more aware of, right? Like this
Exactly.
is what we become more aware of, like this. It's not like trans people were never around before. It's just that we weren't necessarily, we outside of the trans community were not aware. And it's not to say, and two, like for people who may have identified as trans
No, it's
earlier,
not
people
our
who may
culture.
have identified as trans earlier, who like they just didn't know that that was even a possibility for them. Something that, again, in the queer community that gets talked about is like people from small towns that like they didn't know that they could live.
So how important is it for authors to write about this? Look at Jodi Picoult wrote about it, and we're a group that's now talking about it and discussing it and learning
Mhm.
about it. Do they have some sort of a responsibility, do you think, to bring it to the forefront, or I don't know. What do you think about authors writing about relevant situations, putting it in their fiction or whatever?
Was she trans? I'm sorry, but I didn't look into her background.
No,
No.
Jodi Picoult, but the one she wrote with, she did write with a trans person.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but this is our culture. Remember, other cultures, it's totally acceptable for the last thousands of years. It was totally acceptable. I'm reading a book of China, and it's very quite accepting for thousands of years that some
Really?
men
That's
dress as women.
And
interesting.
some indigenous communities as well, like they're two-spirited. There's I've read about that too, Roseanne, is like different communities, different cultures being more accepting of difference, or
Isn't
certain
that
kinds of
show you
difference, I guess.
how important books are in reading? Doesn't that show you how important it is? You should never stop reading,
Was
Well,
this not a double education, this book, all about the bees?
Yeah,
I found that
you're right.
fascinating.
Yes, that was a very informative too. I agree
Mhm.
with you. Absolutely, Carol. Yeah.
Mhm. Wonderful.
All right, Mad Honey, putting it on my list by Jodi Picoult.
I have one I want you to put on your list.
Okay.
Remarkably Bright Creatures by
I
Bezaire.
read it and talked about it before, you
have you?
turkey. Yeah.
Oh my
Imagine
God. Strike that from the recording. Strike that from the recording. Oh.
I wasn't paying attention because I imagine having the imagination to write a book in the voice of an octopus.
Oh my God, is that what this
absolutely-
is? Oh my
it's
Well,
God.
it goes back and
fabulous.
forth.
Oh, it's delightful, and
I'm gonna
it's just
read
the
that.
imagination. You know, whether or not you like the book, it doesn't matter. It's just a matter of the voice that it's written in. Fantastic. In
So
my
Wow,
opinion.
I'm gonna
This
read
book,
that.
it changes, the narrative point of view changes depending on the chapter you're in. I
Yeah.
think we have, I'd say there are about a dozen characters. Hey, Carol, but one of the characters is a giant octopus, and Marcellus, right, is his name?
I don't even remember. I didn't study it 3 pages a night.
I think I can't remember because I read it a few months ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it alternates between one main, there's a primary woman
Yeah.
who's like who's a cleaner at the aquarium, and there's the
Oh.
octopus are the two main, they're the two main characters, and then other characters have voices depending on the chapter as well.
Oh, that's
Lots of
interesting.
fun.
And with a lot of heart too. Like I found it was very touching.
Again,
story.
about differences, right?
About differences.
Yeah.
And the main character is sort of struggling a little bit with connection. I think she lost her son when he was 18, and they don't know what happened to him. And she's at the time of the story, I think she's in her 60s, right?
Yes, I think so.
Nearing retirement, and but she's and I think she and her husband had separated.
She was
And
alone. Yeah, she was definitely alone.
But
yeah, no. And near retirement, which is now what am I going to do with my life? Alone, no son, leaving my friend in the aquarium, it was, and could she go back and visit? It was really very fascinating, really.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot too.
I
second that, Carol.
What are the creatures?
It's
what
called
do they talk
Remarkably Bright Creatures.
What do the creatures talk about? Like about themselves, or are they?
Oh no, it's
about
just the octopus is the only non-human character.
And he talks about what?
Well, you're gonna have to read it.
Okay.
So the octopus is in captivity at this aquarium, and the other main character is a cleaner at the aquarium. And it's a lot of it, it's like clearly with, I think his name is Marcellus. I may have made that up, but he has it's obviously it's what he's thinking and what his motivations are, what he's planning on doing. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
Yep.
Rona, read it. I want to hear you.
I'm gonna read it. I'm definitely gonna read it. I find it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a movie. Does anybody remember that movie where the woman fell in love with this creature, this crazy
I have
creature?
it. I put the Aquaman.
The Shape
or
of
something
Water.
Like
That's it. Oh my God, that's what it reminds me. Was that a book before it was a movie?
I don't think so. I think that's Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
did that one.
Because we're not talking about movies, we're talking about books. So I thought, but that reminds me of it a little bit.
Talking about movies and books, has anybody read The Hours, which was recently released as an opera in English?
Really? Yeah, I read The Hours.
I read a book and a movie.
That's an old book, right? And it was made into a movie with.
Yeah, it had to do with Virginia Woolf. It was very interesting.
That's right. Oh,
Michael,
her suicide. She committed suicide, and
Michael Cunningham, I think, was the author of that one. The Hours. I read it, and I did watch the movie. I think Nicole Kidman played Virginia Woolf in the movie.
Right, exactly.
I liked it. I remember really enjoying it. It's a very literary book.
But very interesting in the opera was 3 different stories parallel, going on at the same time, and how eventually I have to read the book because I don't know how it pulled together. The opera, the first 2 hours, you said, oh, I got to get out of here. The second half brought it all together, and it was fabulous. And it's also hard to listen to an opera in English because you're expecting Italian and not really knowing that you're going to understand it. And it's, I read the subtitles in French because I didn't know what the heck she was saying in English.
Oh, so you saw the opera?
Yeah, it was a movie, in the in one of the theaters downtown. But it was very clever. And I really, now that I think of it, I have to put my name down for the book because I'd like to see how they did it and, how it carried out in the book. Worth seeing the opera.
As a very avid reader, how do you feel about books being made into movies on a constant basis? Does it bother you?
Well, it's an interesting, it doesn't bother me. I look at it as an interpretation. So I waffle back and forth between wanting to read the book first and see the movie first, because the book is almost always better, right? Because there's more to it. But the movie, if you watch the movie first, then it can influence your perception on how the characters would be otherwise. So, or like televised series and everything as well. So for example, I've got a couple of examples. One is Game of Thrones. I read all the books that had been written in Game of Thrones before the television show came out. When the television show came out, I started to watch it with my husband. I watched an episode and a half maybe, and I was like, nope, that's not him. That's not her. Nope.
Really?
Nope.
So that's how you feel. You just don't watch it if it doesn't reach the standards of the book.
Yeah.
That's
And then there's also like the book High Fidelity by Nick Hornby. I had read the book. It's set in England. It's set in a record shop, and it's about sort of the love life and relationships of the main character. And then it was made into a movie a few years later, set in America. I think it's in Chicago. I don't remember which city it's set in, but it's very much American. And again, set in a record shop. And I found it really kept the theme, the feeling, all the core, like the kernel of the book, and it told it in a different way. And I thought the movie was fantastic. They have since made it into a TV show just in the last year. I haven't even looked at it because I was sort of like, well, I don't know if I want to go back.
For sure.
And then there's another book called The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. I loved her.
I think I read that. What was that about again?
That's about a girl who's killed, a little girl who's killed by a neighbor very early on. Like, so like in the first.
Stanley Tucci played him in the movie. That's
yes. And so in the first chapter of the book, she dies, and then but she narrates the book.
Yes. It was wonderful. Yes.
And I loved the book. I saw the movie in the theater, but it was like a pre-screening sort of thing. So I don't think that it was actually entirely finished. Like it was entirely, I don't think it was the same as when it was actually released. And I was very disappointed, but part of that is just because I had loved it so much.
It was amazing.
I think whenever you feel something so strongly about, whenever you feel really strongly about a book or a movie, then it's hard to go the other way. For years as a kid, my favorite movie, well, for years as a kid and into adulthood, my favorite movie was The Princess Bride.
Oh, everybody says that's supposed to be amazing. I don't think I ever saw it. Very funny.
Yeah. And then my aunt's favorite book, she was like, no, the book is better. The book is better. The book is better. Now, she had never seen the movie and I had never read the book. So this was when I was probably about 12, 13. So then we both ended up, like, she watched the movie, I read the book, and then we were both, but there's so much more in the book. There's so much more in the book. The movie is still fantastic. And I mean, it's one of those cult things, right? Like it's just like it's directed by Rob Reiner. It has an amazing cast. Right. It's really well told. But the book is also really funny because, speaking of going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, pre-recording, of talking about footnotes in books, there are a ton of footnotes and they're so snarky, and it also is really interesting. Yeah.
So that's the Princess Bride?
That's the Princess Bride.
Wonderful.
I didn't realize it was a book before the movie.
I
Yeah,
could watch that movie 10 times.
the author of The Princess Bride actually wrote the screenplay for the movie, which I think helped
Mhm.
in terms of translation. But I feel the same way about audiobooks too, in that like audiobooks, it's a it's an interpretation of the book, because again, you listen to someone else reading it. They're not necessarily going to put the same inflections in words or in sentences as you would reading it in your head, right? It shapes a little bit your interpretation of the book depending on how someone else is reading it.
Did you see Crawdog?
I have not yet.
Because Carol without an E said that the scenery was the thing that affected her the most. I haven't seen it. So I
See,
don't know.
I haven't watched it yet because I don't know if I want to watch it before next month's meeting when
Right.
talk
Yeah,
about
we're
it.
doing that. That's right. That's the book you have. I read it. I'm going to
Yeah.
read it again. I'm going to read it
Same,
again.
same. And this is
Mhm.
like, I sort of am like, should I not? Maybe if I watch the movie soon and then I have enough time to let it sort of sink in.
Right.
So I didn't
Yeah.
think about that. I said I have the book. I'm going to read it again because you're doing it in January. I didn't think about seeing the movie. That's something interesting I have to think about too.
Mhm.
Maybe seeing the movie and reading the book, and then
Same, Rona. I'm also going to reread the book.
yeah.
Just
If we-
because like
I
my
hope we can all
impression.
get copies. Because most of us read it a long time ago. I
I
think.
know.
I have
If
it
you
on my
need
Kindle,
copies,
actually.
let me know. I have.
What? I need a copy because I don't
I
have
need a
one.
copy.
I read it, but a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah, along last
Roseanne
year,
needs
2
a
years ago.
copy. Carol needs a copy.
Carol
Rona,
and
you've
me.
got one
I have
digitally.
it on my Kindle.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, that should be fun. But I'm not a moviegoer. So when you're talking about the movies and we don't even watch television except for Jeopardy. So when you say that you've seen the movie, I must be missing out, but I just haven't got the patience to sit through a movie after I've read the book.
I agree. I
Oh,
don't
I've got
either.
another one talking about adaptations.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't read the book yet, but my mother read the book and now she's watching the television series. She recommended the TV series to me, and it's called The Peripheral. And it's based on a book by William Gibson. It's science fiction, and it's something that my mom and I both like. And the TV show is amazing.
The Peripheral.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. It's got Chloe Grace Moretz in it, and I think she's makes really good choices of the movies she's in, because I feel like I've liked everything I've seen her in.
Is it on Netflix?
It's on Prime. It's on Prime. All right, so we've talked about Mad Honey by Jodi Picoult. We've talked about a little bit about, well, we talked about Remarkably Bright Creatures, yes. A little bit about The Hours, which is kind of like to come back to. Roseanne, you've forgotten all the books that you've read. I'll tell you guys about 2 books that I've read recently that I really enjoyed, and they're both of them fairly light. One of them is called The Old Woman with the Knife, The Old Woman and the Knife.
Oh, I saw that in the library. And I said, what the heck is
Really?
that?
Yeah,
I picked
it's
it up,
by
but I didn't take it.
Gu Byung-mo, and it's a
It says
Korean
old
author.
woman. Rona, it says old woman.
Oh, I have a long way to go for there. Oh, years and years.
So I had
The old
read,
woman with the knife?
yeah. And so I'd read reviews about it, and it's supposed to be this fabulous translation. I don't think I had read any Korean books in translation before. And the old woman that we're talking about is an assassin. And she is, well into her 60s, and she's still working, but she lives a very sort of isolated life. It opens with them talking about, or with the narrator talking about how unremarkable she is. Like she does all these things, unremarkable as in like unnoticeable. So she doesn't dress in any way, she doesn't present herself in any way that would be memorable, obviously, for her job. And I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I found it enjoyable. And then after that, I picked up a book called Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Raybourn. And I loved it. It was a very fun thriller, like fast-paced page turner about 4 women assassins who are in their 60s. And it opens up with that. Well, I think the first chapter is talking about how like their first job for this organization. And then the second chapter is like they're all getting together. These 4 women who've worked together for years are getting together for a retirement cruise. And then they find out that their organization has paid for and is sending them on, right, as a thanks for your service, etc. And then of course they find out that they've been targeted.
Of course.
So
Figure that one out.
so what I loved about Killers of a Certain Age is that it's not stereotypical at all. Like none of the women present as, you know, these sort of, I feel like oftentimes women of a certain age are portrayed in a very, very set niche, you know, like they're just like, and they talk about their grandchildren all the time and they do this and not to say that there's anything wrong with those things. It's just that like,
Roseanne? You hear that, Roseanne?
so let's see, like there's one of the women is married. One of the women is married or has been married multiple times and now has just decided to sort of be free. Another woman is recently widowed. Another woman has been single for like pretty much the duration. The way that they interact with each other, their relationships with each other, and I enjoyed it. It was very fun. It's not a heavy read at all. It's very light. It's one of those books that you could read in 2 days. So those are my 2 that I wanted to talk about were Killers of a Certain Age and The Old Woman with the Knife.
I still love this book. I'm sure everybody's read Defending Jacob. Do you remember that book, Defending Jacob? Oh my God, that was so amazing. I loved it. I don't know, it's an old book, maybe, you know, but it was so good. It was excellent. I loved it.
What did you love the most about it?
I found it like a thriller, you know, like it kept my interest. I had to keep, you know, turning, I can't remember, but I'm sure I was shocked in many, you know, I didn't think he did it. You know, I remember there was a court case and the father and everything. And I just remember being surprised. It was just, it just kept my interest. I found it really, really well done. I liked it so much that I wrote an email to the author.
Oh, really?
Yes. And then he told me I think it was made into a movie, but it just got me. I had to write to him to tell him how much I enjoyed the book, which I don't do very often.
What was the title? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Defending Jacob.
Oh yeah, right.
It was the book of the year, like a few years ago. Like, you know, everybody was reading it and they did make it into a movie, but I just, in case one of you haven't
Did they
read
make it
maybe-
into a movie? I didn't know that.
Yes, they did. I remember seeing the movie. I don't remember where, but I do remember seeing the movie or a series. Yeah, and it was very, very good. What else?
What else have we got? I know that I've read more than these 2 books. It's just that those were the 2 most recent ones that I read. I reread, or not I reread, last I think it was at the last Read What You Want book club, and I was talking about Elizabeth Strout. And I had read, or maybe it was at a book review, and I was talking about Elizabeth Strout. I don't remember. But I was talking about her book, My Name is Lucy Barton, or I was meant to be talking about that, but instead I was talking about Olive Kittredge because I was confused in my head. But I've since, so her world of Lucy Barton, she has 4 books that deal with this sort of like with that particular character and like her world a little bit. And so I read the second and third ones of that, waiting to come up to the 4th one. I really like the way Elizabeth Strout writes. If you like Ann Tyler, if you like Anne Patchett. This kind of character development and these kind of, or Alice Munro, like these slower stories, but that have meat to them, then I think that you'll like Elizabeth Strout.
Is there an order that you should read it in?
No, I feel like, I mean, I read them in the chronological orders that they were published, but I don't think it's entirely necessary. It's just that the first book, the first one that was published is My Name is Lucy Barton. And it's, while there are other characters sort of like that are spoken of, it's really rooted in Lucy's life. So it talks a little bit about other characters. The next book, then it's kind of interconnected short stories, but the connection is basically Lucy Barton, even if she's not in the actual story. So it's more about these different other characters.
And Tyler is the author? And Tyler is the author?
No, Elizabeth Strout is the
Oh,
author.
Elizabeth Strout, yeah, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been feeling a lot like rereading books lately, which is lucky that we were having a read what you want then, because
I don't know if I could reread a book for some reason. I don't know if I would be happy rereading a book. It's like, well, I remember it, and I just it's just a way. I don't know. I don't really like to read. I like to read something different, you know. But it should be interesting. You may get something out of it that you didn't get the first time. Is that what
well,
it
this
is?
is it. And that's, you were just talking about rereading Where the Crawdads Sing in preparation for the
Yeah,
book club.
well, because only because it's a book club that I have to read it for, but I would never read it again.
No, I
Agree.
have probably, there are dozens of books that I will come back to over and over. There are
Really?
at least 2 or 3 that I read yearly.
Really?
And what happens the second time you read them?
Oh, there's always new things
Mhm.
that come out, but also sometimes it's just that world that you want to go back into. Like that's another one that I read recently. It was a reread. I reread the book The Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson. So I was talking about science fiction earlier. This is like a steampunk kind of science fiction. So it's almost neo-Victorian, but with gadgets and in a kind of futuristic dystopian some kind of world. And I had read it years ago, and then I started, so I was like, oh, I'd like to be in that kind of environment, was what I was thinking with for a book. So I was looking for another kind of book like that to read, and nothing was grabbing me. And so I was like, what am I doing? Like, it's been 10 years since I've read it. Why don't I just read that book again?
Wow.
And it was like, I really didn't remember a ton of details in that. So it was great. It was fun.
I don't like rereading books because there's so many I want to read, but
Mhm.
I very often now pick up books and I don't remember that I've read them. And
Yeah,
as I'm
that's
reading
another
them,
thing. That's
I
true,
say to
Carol.
myself,
That's true.
plagiarism. There, the top, and then I realize, oh my God, because I started reading The Nightingale again. I know I read it a long time ago because it comes from 2015, but I don't remember, but I will get to a point where I'll say, somebody wrote that before, So I just because I can't remember what I've read so long ago.
Mhm.
You know what else happened? I went to England, bought a book, and paperback, sitting on the plane going, I've read this book, but they changed the titles. They often change the titles of the books.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sometimes a book is
really?
different.
That,
Like, I
that's
know
not
that's
fair.
right.
Yeah,
That's
right.
I don't know why they do that. I'm not sure.
So
But
that
Sell
people
more
like you
books,
will buy
maybe?
it, my dear.
Yeah,
Well, it
exactly.
depends. Part of it is where it's published. So like Harry Potter, the first
Yeah.
book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So I think it was called the Sorcerer's Stone in England, and it was called the Philosopher's Stone in North America. And part of that was
Oh.
because they didn't like this implication of witchcraft. But
Oh, wow.
meanwhile, the whole book is about witches and wizards. But and there's a book right now that's out that was apparently a lot of people have read about it. It's called it was published under Swedish Tango, named Swedish Tango. by Allison Richmond, but it was also published under another name, which we have it under its other title. I'm just saying this because a lot of people have been asking for it recently, and we have it as The Rhythm of Memory, but it's the same book. And so I think that part of it is different publishers having different.
What will sell? Like what will sell? The title will sell better. Which title will sell better? Who
Yeah.
knows? Yeah.
I hope it doesn't happen too often because it's very confusing.
It
But
is.
here's the book I'm reading, and you know what's interesting about this one is you said you haven't read Korean. This I thought was translated from Chinese.
Okay.
I really did, but then I saw the name and going, that doesn't sound Chinese. Brian Klingborg. So I checked his thing, and he just lived in Asia for many years. So he's obviously so he's probably written this also in Chinese. So it's very interesting in the fact that it's written in modern China the way it is today, and he used a lot of Chinese expressions. Of course, he explains them, but not as footnotes. He explains them in the writing. But it's interesting, and because Jesus, if China takes over the world, we won't be surprised.
Right, exactly.
La. And this is about the after COVID. This is after COVID. So they had all kinds of rules. You're not allowed to sell wild animals in a market. But there's there's millions and millions and millions of people selling it on the black market. So they don't care about endangered species. They couldn't give a crap about that. So this is that's why it's called wild prey, but it's scary. I mean, I mean, we're I hope not too many Chinese people are listening to this thing, but I mean, you know, in China, here, I don't care. But the thing is, it's they have it just shows you there's just no, there's no regard, there's no regard they don't have any feelings of, I don't know how they can ever, like, they're having these meeting in Montreal with the cities and everything. I don't know. China's never going to do this. Why should they? I mean, they can't. There's billions of people, and they don't care. I don't think they.
I think that's.
I don't know.
I think we need to be really careful about generalizations.
I know.
I think that saying, like, I mean, like, in terms of generalizations, I would say most governments don't care about people. Really, like, it's the same as, like, but in terms of talking about people themselves, that's a different story. Like, there are always going to be some people in the world who they only care about the bottom line.
But these are so many, you know what I mean? There's like billions. So we're not talking about a couple of hundred. We're talking about 100,000. So we're a million. We talk in Canada about 1,000. They're talking a million. So it's just very hard how they're going to protect the world. I mean, they're going to take it over because they're going to have all the resources. They're going to have the metals. They're going to have all this kind of stuff that is it's just like an eye opening. It's like written in a Chinese, somebody's in China, and even the man who's involved, which is the policeman, he's like shocked by it, even though he lives it.
Of course, but also remember, it is still fiction, right? Like, this is like, it's like reading James Patterson and being like, this is what all Americans are like. You know, take it with a grain of salt still too.
Until proven otherwise.
Books change as the world change, eh? Books change as cultures change, as like the books must be going through such a change now with what the upheaval in the world and with the war in the Ukraine and the States and Trump. I mean, the books are
then the pandemic.
Authors have to be influenced by what's going on around them, and it changes the dynamic of what they're writing, I would presume.
Of course. And this is, I mean, like we were talking earlier about Mad Honey and the visibility of the trans
Mhm.
community. And it's like that kind of book wouldn't have been published earlier. It's the same as that, like, too, we wouldn't have been exposed to as many women writers, to as many writers of color. We wouldn't have been exposed to
true.
that because that
Exactly.
wasn't what publishers were looking for. That wasn't
Mhm.
what was selling. That was because that's not what was being promoted. So this is like depending on, and like too, like we talk so much more openly now about mental health issues than we did previously. So like, and again, talking about news sort of worthy things, and then they find their way into popular fiction,
Yeah.
right? Like years ago, there was a very popular book, We Need to Talk About Kevin. And it was
Oh,
narrated,
yes, I saw that. Yeah.
the narrator
I
was the
made
mother of a
into
school
book.
shooter. And it's like, this is like, that's not something that would have been
Exactly.
really
It's true.
talked about
It's
much. And then
true.
we
You
have
don't think
Columbine, we have
about it,
all
but
of, like this is, it brings it to the forefront of our minds. And to these authors' minds, like something to explore. And then that brings it to the wider public. And the wider public, of course, wants to try to understand what, or like Emma Donohue's Room, right? I mean, like I know she had Pull of the Stars as well, that came out just at the beginning of the pandemic, which she'd been writing previously, very timely. But when she came out with Room was about a young woman who had been abducted and then like kept in captivity for years, had a child from that union. And, that was published still a few years after like these 4 women were taken out of this place in the States. I can't remember but they'd been kept for years. And this is that kind of thing, like that kind of thing that's stranger than fiction. How could this actually happen? How could no one know? How could no one know living in a subdivision? And it just like it has, and it does. The Lovely Bones, right? That one
Yeah.
too.
Tell me something. Do you find that there are a lot more books written with Holocaust themes recently, or is it just what I seem to be gravitating to? If you look on, not Libby or any of those, there's so many Holocaust or stories from the spies from that time. Or am I wrong? It just seems to me it seems to be very
it's
popular. I don't
It's
know.
funny, Carol. I was just talking about this yesterday, and I was saying I'm not sure how popular they are in the wider sort of like world. Like, I mean, World War II fiction and like spies and stuff, like that's great fodder for story, right? Because it's so like the things that were being done were just audacious and amazing, like, and that it's the stuff of stories, right? So I'm not sure how widely popular all sort of Holocaust, World War II era narratives are, but I think that in our community anyway, it is very popular. They circulate very, very widely. And I've spoken with librarians at other libraries who've said, like, they Holocaust stuff does not circulate at their libraries, so they don't buy as many. And for us, we know that it does
Well, this
circulate, so
area
we
that we're
probably
in,
buy more.
Yeah.
of
Partly
course.
because of the suggestions that we receive as well. But I'm not like, I honestly, I couldn't tell you.
Just there seem to be so many. This one's wife and this one, it's just.
Well, and part of that goes to show too, right? It's like that there are so many stories. There are so many stories that could be told. And I think that like, this is it, is that we don't have just one story. Like I'm sure there are some places where they're like, oh, Anne Frank, like the Holocaust, Anne Frank. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's a very important story for sure. There are other ones too. And I think it's important to remember that there are other ones.
You talk about publishers changing names or whatever. How is self-publishing working? Or if people want to get their books published and they're self-publishing, does it work?
Does it work in that they publish? Yes.
Mhm. But they can't.
It's not cheap, I don't think, to self-publish. And then the problem ends up being who's going to carry your book.
Mhm.
So with like
You
with
mean
the
what
big
store is going to carry, or like where
what stores, or like getting it in at
online?
libraries or wherever, it's not going to be
That's-
as widely circulated unless it gets picked up by a publisher or distributor. I used to know more about that than I do now. Like I've forgotten a lot of that. When I worked in bookstores, I knew a little bit more about the difference between like the distributors and the publishers. But from what I recall from 20 years ago when I did work in bookstores, then it was that we would be visited by representatives of the publishing houses who would, of course, they'd have their list of the different books that came out, but they would have certain titles that they were pushing.
Of course.
Well, I think
And
I told you that because I was a buyer for Eaton's for books.
okay.
And the publisher would come in, the representative would come in with his list. And what was on the top of the list was the one they spent the most money promoting. And that's how it got into the stores, you know, and they would give you
It's a
a,
pity because we may be missing out on reading wonderful books because it's
Absolutely.
it's all
Oh, for
about
sure.
the bottom line and
But also, like, think about it. I mean, most publishing houses, there's some area where like they have some kind of open submissions, right? And then they have to go through all of that, every single book, like someone has to read. Sorry, someone has to read all of these books that are submitted, let alone like that's pre-editing. So they have to, whoever it is who's reading it has to have enough interest in it to then devote another bunch of time to editing the book, to then publishing the book. Like there are so many different stages before that
But the
comes in.
problem is somebody like Stuart Woods or James Patterson, who used to be such fabulous writers, but because now they're big and they just, he like Stuart Woods, 2 or 3 a year. I would
Yeah.
rather see somebody who was new, who's
exactly.
good.
I agree because it's garbage, it's crap that
Garbage
they, you know,
now.
it's
But it's
horrible.
this, it's, think of it like food.
Nicholas Sparks, the same thing. I mean, you know.
Think of
what
it
about
like food
Jackie
and
Collins
restaurants.
and Daniel Steele? I mean, it's,
Yes.
Think of it like food and restaurants. That's the name recognition.
Yeah.
So with Stuart Woods, people know what to expect. It's the same as like
No.
the chain restaurants, and they'll say, "Oh, that's what I'm in the mood for." Whereas if
Yeah.
it's some mom and pop shop, it's Joe Schmo there who's published something, then people say, "Oh, I don't recognize that name," and they walk past it. They might not
Right.
even pick
It's
it up
such a
and give it a
pity.
try.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, we see that all the time. We see that
Yeah.
all the time. So oftentimes people will pick up a book. This is why everyone always ends up reading the same things, because those are the books that are reviewed. Those are the books that have net galleys that are circulated, which is to say like free copies circulated to get buzz sort of going about it. I mean, there's more of that now with more independent or less big writers with places like Goodreads, you know, like but they have to get the free copies. They have to get the free copies to read first and then to talk about.
I'm going to have to love you and leave you all. I wish you a wonderful holiday and see you for the Crawdads in January 16th. Is it? What's the date? 17th?
The 17th, yes.
Okay, so I will reread it and, and I will watch the movie.
All right.
And all of you, Carol, Roseanne, everybody, you, Katie, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. See you.
Oh,
on
the very same to you, Rona.
New Year.
Okay, bye, everybody. Love you all.
See you
Rona,
next
and read
year.
the one about the octopus. I want to hear your
I'm
comment.
going to. That's my
Okay.
next book. Okay, and we'll talk about it. Wonderful. Thanks, dear. Bye.
Good.
Bye.
Take care. Oh.
Uh,
Well,
So,
I
yeah.
think these when we're able to discuss various books. It's exciting because I go into the library and say, what am I going to read next? And this is giving me, as we're talking, I'm putting the books, I'm entering them in my reserve list.
I'm looking at a pile of books of over 27 books that are in a pile in the corner of all from the library.
It's wonderful. Wonderful.
Fancy. I mean, this is the only book in 2022. But I just called Maria. In 1965, when I started teaching, I taught kids who didn't speak English and who didn't read, grade 3. And I told them to bring comic books. I used to bring my brother's comic books. And now I'm interested in this graphic novel thingy wingy. So I said to her, I said, I've never read a graphic novel. I've seen them, over the years, especially in Europe. A lot of people read on the buses. You see them reading these graphic novels. I don't see that here. I don't take that many buses, but I'm just saying that you really see it more common at one time in Europe, especially in France. Oh my God, I remember seeing a lot of people, adults reading this, and I'm going, I couldn't figure out, because here I was teaching it and you could read comics for like grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, but what are you reading comics when you're an adult? What the heck is that? But I registered for the graphic novel club if she hits it on the ground, only because it's an experience. I've never had it. She says you have a whole shelf of that, so they need 6 people and only have 4 right now. So I give her credit. I just want to try like something different.
At the book sale, we're starting to get graphic novels handed in for the book sale. I never had it before.
I saw
Years
that.
ago, we never had science fiction. And when I started a section on science fiction, Lisa and Justin thought I was a nutcase. And there are tons of books in that section now. But the graphic ones are just starting to show, to be returned, or not returned, donated. Not many, but it's starting.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I've been reading graphic novels for years, and like years and years ago, I saw this documentary called, I believe it was Comic Book Confidential, and it was it had like Will Eisner was one of it interviewed a bunch of different people. It was great. It was a long time ago, so my memory not so great. But it's that, again, this interpretation. So like the artists are interpreting it while like they're providing you pictures as well as the story, so that it's so much more to look at and to absorb. It's absorbing these stories differently because too there's that art component. Yeah.
So I'm going to try it. I mean, I may not like it, but I'll give it a try, because number one, it's just a different genre. I mean, just different.
Well, I was talking about this yesterday too, about how, the thing is, I think that every genre has some really great works in it. And I'm talking about books right now, but I mean that with music and film, art, like different genres have great things and they have garbage, right? Like you.
Yeah, but what somebody's garbage is somebody else's great. So
it might be, but what I mean is that like I would hesitate to write off an entire genre just because it doesn't seem like it's your cup of tea. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be that every, like, you try one mystery book and you're like, oh, I hate mysteries. And then you read an Agatha Christie and you're like, oh, this is brilliant. Or whatever it is, like there are good and bad in all of them.
Do you know who just started that? Is Carol, the other Carol. And she's now devouring mystery stories.
Oh yeah.
Mysteries or stuff. She wasn't into that. And I don't know what made her, I guess she was bored with some of the other stuff. And she's reading a lot of it now. You'll see some of her suggestions. If you take a look and analyze them, you'll see.
Well, you're reminding me that I've been lax in talking about her other books that she wanted me to mention. She also wanted me to mention The Matzo Ball by Jean Meltzer.
That was reviewed with Mirage.
Mirage.
Yeah, Mairead, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so this is she said it's delightful with many Jewish names for Hanukkah and Jewish food. She suffers from chronic fatigue syndrome. The author does in real life too, and describes how it affects her life. An old boyfriend is making a huge Hanukkah ball and she gets involved. That's the story for the matzah ball.
Right.
And then she also wanted to talk about Homewreckers by Mary Kay Andrews. And she said the title is misleading as the main character renovates old homes.
Right. Yeah, no, that one I took out. I haven't read it yet because I'm on the Nightingale, but that one. And I don't know where I got Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Did you read that?
Yeah, Emma Straub.
Yeah, okay, fine. I didn't realize. Yeah. So I have, is it? It's Gabriel Zevin.
Oh, Gabriel Zevin. Yes, Tomorrow and
Right,
Tomorrow.
right.
So she wrote Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and Emma Straub wrote This Time Tomorrow.
Today and Today and Today.
This Time Tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, but yes, Gabrielle Zevin. Yes, I did talk about that one too.
Did you? So maybe
Yeah.
that's how I got it, because when we're talking, I get into I put my request in right away so I won't forget. So that's probably how I got it.
Yeah. So that was the one that I read, and I thought, I didn't think that I would be interested in reading a book about like computer game developers.
Mm-hmm. But look at what we learned, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with this mad honey. My brother keeps bees as a hobby.
Okay.
Like him, I wanted to write to him and tell him to read it, but I don't want to impose, the other part of the story on him because I don't know about my nephews, or I don't, I'm not sure that I'm ready to tell him about it. So, or he's open, but he's a small community on an island in BC.
Okay. I would say, you could say that you read it and it has like this beekeeping theme, and you think of him.
Yeah. I because really the beekeeping, I want to know how he is into this kind of stuff, and does he agree that different times of the year the honey has a different flavor, and whatever. So
I used to work at a small organic grocery store, and we had these local producers of honey come in, and they sold their honey as fall, summer, winter, and spring. And we had a taste of it. And so it was the same bees, but of course the honey tastes differently in the same way that buckwheat honey tastes different than clover honey, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because this is it. The bees are eating different things, producing different flavors. I think that's really interesting. Hey, like the way that, especially in North America, right? That bees can't have the same kind of food all year.
No, for sure not. Anyhow, but that you're going to enjoy Mad Honey. It's
all right.
It seems that the author did a wonderful presentation at one of the synagogues a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, it's you have to read this book, and somebody bought one, and so I have it. I never even had heard of it, but the author was supposed to have been quite special. Presentation was very good.
I've got my list of books to read.
It's distressing because I told you I started in the letter A and I'm working my way around, and I'm still in A after 70 years. They should. I'm going to have to speak to the person who buys the books and tell them to at least get into the letter B. No more A's, please.
They're not allowed to purchase anyone.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. But, talking about how books are published and the publishing houses brings back so many memories, because I used to have manuscripts to read that the rep would come in and say, I want you to read this and I want your comments. It makes you feel very important, because this book, which they have just put millions of dollars in, he didn't tell you that. He wants to make sure that you get it on the shelf,
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Very interesting. And I went to Indico for the first time in forever this week. Somebody wanted to get a gift certificate. I can't get over the store. It was a coffee shop, and they're selling rugs and stuff. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, and toys. It's like books are maybe like a third of what they sell.
It's fantastic. And I don't know, do you remember Classics Bookstore?
Classics, no.
Yeah. Oh, okay, before your time. And I'm trying to remember where the location was because I worked in classics at one point, as you're talking about,
Uh-huh.
selling books. And I remember, but I can't, it's downtown and it could have been, Roseanne, maybe you know.
Roseanne remembers. She said,
Yeah.
You're muted, Roseanne.
Oh, I'm
Unmute
going to mute
yourself so we
because I
can
have
hear
a
you.
call coming in. I'm sorry.
I thought the classics, I thought it was on Peel. No, Peel and St. Catherine?
I
Maybe.
think so. It certainly isn't where Indigo is now, but it is in that area. And I remember that. And what was there before? No, what was there after? There was the one that closed was the one like in the mall. What was the name of the bookstore?
Oh my goodness, what was the name of the bookstore?
I don't remember. When I listen to Katie and she remembers authors and books she read, I can't remember anything. It's very distressing.
That's okay. I can't remember my children's names. I
Oh,
can't
well.
get them straight still. So
My mother used to say, "Hey, you." After she tried 5 names, she finally gave up and pointed and said, "Hey, you."
The only bookstore I know, because I spent a lot of time in, is Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Nobles, right. So I think maybe Barnes and Nobles took over Classic downtown. I think there was
No, we have no Barnes and Nobles here.
not Barnes and no, you're right. It wasn't Barnes and Nobles. That's in Vermont. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't remember. Whatever. Somebody took over Classics, but I can't recall. What was Kohl's? Kohl's. Was it?
Okay.
That's the one in the mall. Kohl's.
Yeah.
Kohl, how could we forget Kohl's Notes?
That's
Katie
right.
doesn't know that.
I
Katie, do
do.
you know anything about Kohl's Notes?
I never used them, but I know what
Oh.
they are.
Oh, stop being so prissy, for heaven's
Liar.
sake. Everybody used them. Especially
you're
for
such a
Shakespeare.
liar.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? No, I never did.
Really?
I'm not saying that I read everything, but I would make stuff up on my own instead of
There you go.
when it
Well,
was
the
for
next time-
school.
Katie, the next time I get Cole's notes for the book sale, I'll bring you a copy and you'll have to review it, okay? We could
I
have
never
a
came
whole
across any
session on
Cole's notes.
Cole's notes.
Oh my goodness. You're kidding. I never came across any Kohl's Notes when I was doing the thing when I was unpacking the boxes. I never
Really?
came across any.
Oh, yeah, no, we had them. I don't know where they are. Maybe somebody who threw them out because didn't feel that they were worth anything, but
I was gonna say maybe
Students.
someone instead came by and saw them, was like, I'm in
bought them.
school.
bought them all, yeah. Yeah, a school teacher, an English school teacher. Katie,
They
this
were
is a
great.
wonderful, for me, a wonderful session. I really enjoy, I enjoy both types, but this one, I like to hear when people have read the books because I stand in front of the shelves and I say, what should I take out? And I end
Yeah.
up taking out stuff that I've already read because it appealed to me. And I don't mean to take them out. I told you, I keep saying plagiarism. And then I say, no, if you go into your history, you probably read it in 2015,
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all that, but this is it too, is that just because you read it 10 years ago doesn't mean that you would read it the same way now either.
Sure. The only
I
thing
don't go
is
see
that
a movie twice either. I in the theater, I will not pay to see a movie twice. On TV maybe, but not in the theater.
Mm.
Nope. I don't waste my time. The only movie I ever saw twice.
See, I
was
don't
called-
ever, and now you're
No,
telling us
that's
about the
true.
exception.
I was 17 years old, 18 years old. I went to a movie by myself downtown and I got accosted. A man came down next to me and started to feel himself off. And then I moved the chairs, moved the seat. So he followed me because there was nobody in the theater. And so I had to leave the theater. And I said, and this The Great Escape, with Steve McQueen.
Oh, wow.
And,
I see this
Ah.
week.
and so I went about a couple of weeks later, I went with somebody and I went
to
see it
actually
again.
watch it.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
think the only one I've seen more
I've
than
ever
once.
played twice.
I saw
terrible
Fantasia
experience.
a few times.
Which one?
Fantasia. We're not moviegoers.
The
Wow.
Disney, the
Walt
dancing.
Disney thing. Yeah. But that's
Okay, well, that's because we had a small TV. It would have probably looked fabulous in the theater, actually.
well, I'm
Yeah,
not a theater goer. Not at all.
yeah.
And it's very strange because in error, I ordered a book from the library. And when I went in to get it, not Danielle, whatever, said to me, this is not the kind of thing that you generally order. And it ended up, it was a DVD or something. And I said, how did I ever get that? You know, like they know that the girls there are so terrific. They all know my reading. I've been going for a while, but they'll say, and I used to say to Anthony, how could you let me take this book home? You know, I've read it. Anyhow, a bunch of wonderful people, I have to say. With that, I have to sign off.
That's
because
fair
I-
enough.
Yeah, but thank you as usual, wonderful. Roseanne, nice seeing you.
Same
And-
here.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Take
It's
care,
always
Carol.
nice seeing you, half of you, Carol. It's
Yeah.
always nice
Oh, I
seeing
saw
half
I
of
was
you.
sitting up straight so you could see my whole whatever.
I have this live transmission, closed captioning, so I can't see you even when you sit up. You have to stand up.
Oh, then you'll see my chest. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, you don't bring a bra? Oh.
Absolutely, I'm dressed. I'm like you.
Well,
Katie,
I
you
think
should-
we'll probably call it off for today, unless
Yeah.
Roseanne, you have more to talk about.
could you put me down for the book? Crawdog?
For
Put
Yes.
me down for the book.
yes,
Thank you.
I'm going to put a copy upstairs for you, Carol,
Please, yeah.
So
so
I'll
you
be in
can
some
pick
time.
it up anytime after today.
You have a
Perfect.
large
Roseanne?
print?
Are
You have a
you
large-
coming? Are you coming in now, or are you receiving at home? Are you getting deliveries, or are you coming
No, the
in?
weather's still good. The weather's still good.
Okay, so I'll set a copy upstairs for yourself as well.
If you have
Perfect.
a large print, I'll take that one.
I think I do.
Oh, if you have a second one, I'll take it, but I'm fine.
Okay.
It's just- You know what? The problem with the large print is that if you're lying in bed reading and it falls on you, it wakes you up.
Yes.
What are you
So
talking about? Are you kidding?
wakes you up.
My exercise. I
Yeah.
use the-
You're right.
It
You're
wakes
right.
you up just enough to remind you that it's time to put your book down to go to sleep.
There you go.
no, I fall asleep.
Absolutely. Thanks,
No, I
ladies.
fall
Nice
asleep.
seeing you.
Thank you
Take
both.
care.
Looking forward to seeing you both next year. Happy holidays to
Oh,
you both.
yeah, right.
Happy
Happy
Merry
holidays.
Christmas. Ho, 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 and Happy New Year. Keep
Bye
safe.
bye. Good health. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.